All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our Florida Gators versus Utah Utes preview and prediction. Utah minus 7.5 point favorites, 47.5 is the total. 8 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN on August 31st, a Thursday night game in Salt Lake City. The Gators lead the series all-time 2-0, winning last year 29-26 off of an interception in the end zone late in that contest in the Swamp. Looking at the Florida offense, this is a unit that certainly is looking to improve through the air. They lose Anthony Richardson, who certainly helped this run game flourish. Graham Mertz, though, he's going to come in here from Wisconsin, where he pretty much had an up-and-down career with the Badgers. This is a guy who always showcased some pretty impressive talent with his arm. And, for the most part, though, his career was not all that great. He had 19 touchdowns last season through the air. 5 of those came against Northwestern. He had 3 against New Mexico State. So these numbers are a bit skewed. He did have 2,100 yards as well. Again, they'll really beat up on some of the lesser competition. Mertz really seemed to struggle in that scheme at Wisconsin, an ancient one that was really hard for really any quarterback ever to thrive in. But I don't know if this one's much better, Nick, because obviously last year the QB run with Anthony Richardson was a big part of this offense. And I'm very interested to see, how they kind of tailor-make this around him. I think that his debute's either going to consist of, impression or complete disaster. I don't think you're going to see any in between here. What are the expectations for Graham Mertz, and what do you think they're going to incorporate in this offense to try and get him going in the right direction after, a couple of bad years at Wisconsin that may really have hurt his confidence going on the road to Salt Lake City? Could get rattled very easily, so what can they do here?
I think it's certainly a weird transition to go from Anthony Richardson to Graham Mertz here. I don't know if this fit really works for Florida, bringing in Graham Mertz. I have a lot of question marks. Not the best career at Wisconsin. Obviously, the scheme might play a certain role with that. This Florida offense has some nice talent on the ground, certainly. And we'll get to those backs in a second. The wide receiving room doesn't really help him out a whole lot either. I think there is a lot of lacking talent here. I get worried about this. Marcus Burke is probably your number 2 guy as your redshirt sophomore at the wide receiver Z. Caleb Douglas was a true freshman last year who had some good burst and nice appearances. He comes in at the wide receiver X. Andy Jean, a true freshman, looks to get some playing time early on as well. And then obviously the headliner is Ricky Pearsall at the wide receiver Y, a good player, a nice leader, some good grabs, nice yards after the catch as well. Good player overall. This offensive line has some nice pieces they plug in. Damian George at right tackle, plugging him in. Micah McCuzza as well at left guard, a new step in. I worry about this offense a lot. I don't know if they're going to be able to attack the air. They're going to have to rely on the run game a lot this year. They were pretty good on the ground last year, 200 yards per game, and they're going to rely on that a lot this year. I think this is going to be the key for this Florida offense is ground and pound with guys like Montreal Johnson, Trevor Etienne. I just don't see a way that Graham Mertz leads this team to wins through the air.
Montreal Johnson, a physical runner, can rip off some long runs as well. Trevor Etienne, great burst and nice long speed. And they also had a Cam Carroll, nice rotational piece that was productive for Tulane. And this was an offensive line in a ground game that really dominated the Utes last season. They're looking for an encore performance. Kingsley Ukukon at center. Richie Leonard, he's back. Austin Barber's probably that standout there at left tackle. You alluded to Michael Muzka from Baylor. And then Damian George, another transfer coming over. He's going to slide in at right tackle. I think this is a really good offensive line. They have nice size, nice physicality. But one thing we talked about just a moment ago on our other episode where we broke down this game is that, this running game has to be good on first and second down. They have to, really thrive. They're going to have to see 40, 45 touches because, like you said, Graham Mertz, we're not really sure he can do this year. We're not really sure what he's going to do in terms of a scheme fit. And you don't know who's going to bail him out in terms of pass catching because you have those 3 true freshmen, Mizell, Watson, and Jean. They might be leaned on outside of Ricky Purcell. You don't really know who you have. So the passing game, even if Mertz is on point, he's going to have some of these other guys help him out. But I think it's got to start with this running game. That's where they're going to win this game if they do. Physicality is really important, Nick. How do you see them performing in this contest after last year's game where they really dominated, especially late in this contest? Obviously, the lack of threat with the QB legs is going to make things much easier for the Utes defensive front now that there's a statue in the pocket for the Gators.
I think you're going to be able to contain this Florida offense very easily. I think the key to success here for Florida is get ahead of the sticks early, first and second down, pick up nice ground game, and you have Cam Carroll coming over from Tulane for third down. Just kind of transition him in, throw him on third down. I think he's got some good opportunities there. Trevor Etienne's got a good power burst as well. They're going to have to find a way to stay ahead of the sticks. If they find themselves behind in this game and behind on drives, it's going to be a struggle fest. I don't think Graham Mertz will be able to carry them from playing from behind. They're going to have to jump on Utah early on the ground, try to make them uncomfortable and find a way to hit them in the jaw on the ground because otherwise they're going to struggle. This offense is not going to play well from behind, and they're going to lose this game if they fall behind early.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. I'd say playing from behind is going to be the biggest downfall for the Gators. Got to get ahead early And if they are behind, they need to be able to establish this ground game, and they have to be able to eat up some time of possession. That's certainly going to help offset that. Looking at the Utes offense, how much confidence does Cam Rising have following his ACL tear? Michael Penix 2 years ago from Indiana. Remember, he came back from an ACL, and he was just flat out awful because the confidence was not there. Could not throw an accurate ball to save his life. Just a very upsetting performance. And that could be something I think you have to look for with every player. Rising, he tore his in the Rose Bowl. Very upsetting that he exited that game 2 years in a row. He's looking to get there, back to that contest once more. Rising, a phenomenal player, though. The guy plays with plenty of toughness. He's a great leader for this football team. Very good on the move. He's a very impressive, polished performer on third down. Cam Rising, a heck of a quarterback here for the Utes. He's really taken this position, and he has blossomed. 26 touchdowns, over 3,000 yards for him. He adds a lot on the ground. 465 and 6 scores rushing the ball. Plays above his 218-pound listed size. He's always falling forward for runs. You talked about, the Florida offense not having that capability this year. At least it doesn't appear with much ground game from their quarterback. Rising's going to be able to provide that here for Utah. Really looking to keep this Florida defense off balance, and that's something Utah they're great at, is balance on this offense. One of the best in the nation at doing so. What are you looking forward to this season, Nick, or at least in this contest? Mainly Rising and his ACL tear is going to be the biggest thing I'm monitoring.
I'm excited to see what this veteran offense for Utah can do. They return a lot of guys who have some great experience. It is slightly concerning that their two best players, Cam Rising and Brant Kuthi, are coming off ACL tears. It's very tough to return from that injury. It's one of the toughest injuries to return to in sports. When you tear that ACL, it could be tough. You can come back like Penix did and really have no confidence and struggle. Or you can come back and really burst onto the scene. We've seen several athletes in the past tear their ACL and just never come back the same. It's always difficult to come back from that. I think Cam Rising, though, is a veteran gunslinger who's been in this game for a while, a good leader for this Utah offense. He's good under the snap, good under the pressure, very good. He can move around, use his legs, very talented player. He's a decent wide receiving room to throw to. Devon Veely is a very good wide receiver at the X. Money Parks at the Z, solid player. I like this backfield a lot. Micah Bernard's a very underrated running back. Jaquindon Jackson as well has some nice bursts, good downfield speed. Jalen Glover, his true freshman, got limited appearances. He returns as a sophomore. Nice expectations for him as well. There's a lot of balance with this Utah offense. What I think is the biggest key here is that they can kind of hit you in different ways. They scored 38.6 points per game this past season. I don't know if they'll score that many this season in general. I don't know how much they'll score this game, but I think they have an opportunity to put a lot of points on this Florida defense that has some question marks that we'll get to in a second.
Yeah, the Utah running game was pretty solid last year against Florida, 230, 5.9 yards per carry, but they didn't seem to have as much volume as you would have liked. But throughout the year, 3,000 rushing yards for this offense. Jaquindon Jackson, a bulk of his 531, came over 4 games. A former quarterback converts over here, 6'2", 227. And this guy, he was phenomenal. Showcases a great spin move. His phenomenal as a downhill runner with plenty of physicality. Micah Bernard flirted with the portal a little bit, but he's coming back as a versatile player. 34 receptions on top of his 533 rushing yards. So I'm looking to see who's going to take main claim of this running back room. I think they're going to see equal amount of touches. They know these guys and their characteristics and their strengths, and I think that they're going to have Andy Ludwig's going to get these guys on the field in correct scenarios, and I think they're really going to strive. Kincaid, he's out. Brant Kuthi, he returns, highlights this receiving core. Cam Rising in Utah, they're phenomenal off play action. They get you going downhill with this physical grounded pound, and then they hit you with that play action. Money Parks, Devon Veely, these guys can really stretch you out. Kuthi, a versatile tight end. Obviously, this isn't the deepest room in terms of talent over here at Utah. They did do a good job, though, in getting these guys developed. So I definitely think they have some nice options here. And then Thomas Yasmin at tight end. They have another solid option there. I love this offense, Nick. I just think the balance is phenomenal. The offensive line, they don't really put these guys in the NFL by means, but guys like Keaton Billis, they're certainly going to be leading the way. And some of these other guys, Michael Makafosi, they certainly need to step up. Some of these guys certainly struggled in terms of individual performance, but the physicality's there. And the Gators, they're aware of that. Where do you think the edge lies?
Certainly is a very powerful offense. It has a lot of different ways to hit them. This defensive line for Florida does have some physicality. I do worry about this offensive line for Utah. They might get a little overwhelmed, but that's where I think the passing attack comes in and can attack what is a kind of questionable secondary for Florida we're going to get to in a second. I like this offense a lot for Utah. It's a very fun, high-paced offense that has a different way to hit you with different attacks. They have good tight end play, good running back room, and a pretty talented wide receiving room, and a good quarterback under the center. I think this Utah offense is going to have a field day against this Florida defense and going to set the pace for the season.
Yeah, you look at that Gator defense that's going to look and contain these guys. 87th points per game allowed last year, 100th against the run. Certainly, we're not that great. And I thought this defense would be a lot better than they were, and they just were kind of poor, I'd say, for the most part. One of the biggest question marks is, can they generate some interior pressure? Nobody really last year stepped up on this defensive line outside of Princely. Human and Benley, he had 4.5 sacks for them. He's expected to compete as an all-conference type player this season. But who else is going to step up on this pass rush? Justice Boone, he just tore an ACL or something along that nature. He's no longer going to be there. Player that had high hopes for. Cam Jackson, he's got some nice size, a 300-plus pounder at nose tackle. Desmond Watson, obviously, he's a big guy as well. I'm not sure what he's down to now. He was in that 350, 400-pound range, though. A complete gap clogger. Has some nice athletic ability for how big he is. Chris McClellan as well. Caleb Banks, another transfer. I'm looking for players on this interior to really step up, and I don't think anyone else outside of Princely in terms of the edge rushing department is going to step up. They're very young. They have sophomores and true freshmen there. This edge rushing unit is really going to struggle, Nick. I really think third and shorts are the best opportunity for this defense to get off the field, not third and tens, because Cam Rising and these guys, they're doing a great job of converting on these third and longs with this receiving core. They have some very strong-handed pass catchers. And, of course, a gamer at quarterback who can do it with his legs or through the air. He's a good decision maker. So I think they're going to have to get in these third and fours or shorter, Nick, if they want to have the best chance to get off the field. Obviously, that's weird to say. Being in a lesser situation, you think more yards, the better, right? I don't think that's going to be the case here one bit. I think they need to be in those third and shorts.
Outside of Princely, this defensive line, it has serious question marks, but Princely is a complete game changer, very dominant player. I like what he can do. Just an all-conference player that's so talented, really good player on the interior. Nice to get after the quarterback, but I think he's going to be the key. If they can unleash him early on against this kind of weak Utah offensive line, they might have some room for success. Cam Jackson's a good transfer coming over at nose tackle. Desmond Watson, I like him a lot. Chris McClellan as well. Kind of an underrated player. He was a true freshman last year. Looked good at times. He looks to step up this year. Defensive tackle, good player. Losing Justice Boone is definitely a loss. I kind of agree with you on your assessment that they're going to be better in third and short. It's a weird thing to say, but I think that's going to put them in the best situation because Utah's going to kind of struggle on that play action and make something happen on those short situations, in my opinion. I think they're going to have a good opportunity. They weren't great against the run at all last year, 100th in the nation. The 28.8 points per game is not as bad as it could be. It certainly isn't great, but it could be a lot worse for this Florida defense. We had high expectations on this defense last year. We thought they were going to have a pretty good season. They really disappointed us. I'm not excited for this defense this year. I just think they lost a lot of talent, and they really haven't stepped up and found the pieces. But having a guy like Princely who's a game changer there in your defensive line is a very solid piece to have. He could have a good game here.
Yeah, the top playmakers in this front seven depart. Brenton Cox, obviously, he was gone after a couple games into the year. Ventrell Miller, Amari Burney. They had some playmakers there at the linebacking area. Those guys are gone, though, and I'm pretty concerned about this unit. Trujada Mitchell, he was a team captain at Ohio State. That's certainly some great notion that he's bringing over. That's a very prestigious honor to have there in Columbus. He's he's a hard hitter who's going to match up with Shamar James, a rising sophomore who was one of the top players in his respective class in 2022. Derek Wingo, a veteran as well. Deuce Spurlock comes over from Michigan, and Scooby Williams looking to get on the field a little bit more too. I have concerns about this linebacking core. We talked about South Carolina. We talked about how they didn't really have a traditional type of SEC linebacking room, and I think the same thing could really be said about Florida. This just doesn't seem like they have the greatest in terms of physicality. I think James is certainly going to step up and be the best player on this defense this season. Well, maybe. I think he'll be one of the top threes, no doubt. But the rest of these guys, I'm not sure how they're going to do. I don't know how they're going to compete. Don't know how they're going to match up with Brant Kuthi. Don't expect much from them in this ball game, but if they can showcase some physicality, all bets are off.
Shamar James is a very good player returning. I'm excited to see what he can do. He could certainly break out at linebacker. He has some good potential. Derek Wingo, a junior, could be involved at middle linebacker position as well. This defense lost a lot of talent in the middle of the defensive field, which is really not helping. I'm interested to see what they can do. Like you said, the physicality, we have to see if it's there. I don't really know if they'll be able to hit you hard. They're going to go up against a big tight end, Kuthi, who could really have a physical field day against them. He might be able to throw these guys to the ground and get free and get open. Kuthi might be in line for a very big day if he can find the matchups he likes against the middle of this defense.
And now the secondary, I think, is probably the best unit on this defense. And that is not saying much because they certainly struggled in their own right last year. But Kamari Wilson, another rising sophomore, he proved to be a great tackler. He had plenty of ups and downs. But I certainly think second years for starting defensive backs are always better than their first. He's a contact-hungry player. This is a prototypical SEC player, though, in Kamari Wilson, a former five-star. R.J. Moten, a really good communicator. He's really good at diagnosing the run. This is going to be a big-time player for the Gators coming over from Michigan. I think he's really going to help sort some things out here in the back end, especially against this play action, Nick. This guy is certainly going to be one who's definitely pulling the things out on the tape this secondary needs to see heading into this contest. And they're hoping guys like Jason Marshall can thrive. He didn't really have that leap we expected this past season, but he does have good instincts and anticipation. Corey Raymond, obviously a great defensive back coach. Really want to see what he can do this year. Jalen Hill, another one of these players coming off an ACL tear, looking to occupy the slot. There's some big-time expectations for him. And I think people are excited to see what Devin Moore can do, showcase some promise as a run stopper as well. I certainly think there's some nice versatility in the secondary. I think they're really going to blossom this year, once again, under Corey Raymond. Depth is a little bit of a concern at safety, so hopefully these guys can stay on the field. Going over into the mountains here might be tough on these guys, so you hope they're conditioned properly. The secondary, though, they're going to be flying all over the field. Their best chance to win is with these guys playing good.
This is a young secondary that is talented group. Kamari Wilson, Miguel Mitchell, two solid players as true freshmen last year. Devin Moore, another good hard-hitting cornerback, nice player. Mitchell has a strong safety, underrated player who has some opportunity to step up this year. Jason Marshall at right cornerback, good player. He's a good leader for this team. Jaden Hill coming back from injury, he's a talented piece as well. The secondary certainly has some question marks for me. I think they're a very talented group, but I'm really curious to see how they're going to perform against this offense. They can hit you in a lot of different ways with play action. Can they stay in the game and be able to be physical and get the plays done? I'm not entirely sure I see it. I think they're going to struggle here, but this unit does have some upside for the rest of the season.
Now looking at the Utah defense, obviously they gave up 283 last year and 4 touchdowns to the Gators, over 7.2 yards per carry. Sour taste in their mouth, no doubt. Anthony Richardson accounted for a good bit of that, but they certainly did lose the physicality battle, I'd say, up front. The rest of the year, though, they're pretty stout. They only gave up over 180 yards rushing only once, and that was UCLA in a game they lost in. This is a really sound run defense, though, nonetheless. This is a great defensive line. There's plenty of options. Junior Tafuna, Van Fellinger, Connor O'Toole really stepped up last season, and then Jonah Ellis, another young guy who was able to make plays for him. Simone Pipa on the interior, 6'3", 345. There's all kinds of size and physicality. When we talk about Utah, we talk about how they don't really put guys in the NFL, but they preach physicality and toughness, and that's the name of the game for them in the trenches, and they're looking to get redemption against this strong Florida ground attack. Who do you think has the edge here, Nick? Because this is very interesting to see what is going to happen here in the trenches.
I think this is certainly interesting to see what happened in the trenches. I do think that this Florida offensive line does have a bit of a benefit here. This defensive line does have some question marks. They bring in some new pieces, and they kind of struggle in the trenches. Junior Tifolo is a good player. Jonah Ellis as well is a talented player. Simonte Pepe, Van Fillinger is another good player off the edge. I just think that this offensive line is good for Florida. They have some nice players. If there's going to be a way that Florida wins this game, it's going to be on the ground after dominating in the trenches. I think they can certainly win the battle in the trenches and give these running backs some option. I think the reason Utah wins this game is for different reasons. They're a bit weak in the trenches. It's not going to be a long-term problem. I think it's going to be a bit of a problem against a team like Florida from the SEC is a little more physical with a more beefed-up offensive line. It could be an issue early in the game, but I think there's just too much talent for Utah for it to be a long-term issue. I am going to give the edge, though, to this defensive line, or to this offensive line for Florida. I think the defensive line might struggle a little bit to get after the quarterback.
Yeah, I think the lack of the QB run threat, though, is certainly going to make life easier for Lander Barton and Kieran Reed in the middle. Reed really put up some good numbers for him. Barton, he was a true freshman last season, so he didn't really have much of an impact in this game. That's going to be a completely different story this time around. Kieran Reed had 9.5 tackles for loss. He had 72 tackles and 5 sacks. Had a handful of pass breakups as well. Lander Barton was just phenomenal as a freshman. Mohamed Diabate, he departs. So there is a bit of turnover in this room. Gabe Reed off the edge as well. But for the most part, they're getting a lot of veterans back. And this is certainly going to be a strong part for this football team all season long. And I think it's going to start here against this Florida run game. I think they're really going to be able to limit them a good bit. And the DBs, they shouldn't give up big plays to this wide receiver group. Obviously last year that was a big problem, especially watching the USC games. Just Morgan Scalley's defense, play after play, just getting hammered in the back end. After Travis Broughton is back, he's a pretty admirable performer. Clark Phillips, his departure is really big for this defense. And I think throughout the year, you'll see that certainly play out. Cole Bishop, a phenomenal safety. This guy, he can line up in the slot. He can make plays in the box. He's a physical pass rusher, really lays the boom versus a run. Great patroller with his versatility. Phenomenal player there. There are some concerns with the secondary, and I think they'll get burned throughout the year periodically. But in this game, if they do, just going to be a flat-out embarrassment. It should not happen.
They won't get burned in this game, but they could potentially later in the season. I like Cole Bishop, good leader at strong safety, solid player. Landon Barton as well is a good player. He didn't play a whole lot last year in this game, like you said, but he's got an opportunity to step up, looked good as a true freshman. Kieran Reed as well is a good player, kind of moves around there at that rover position. I like him a whole lot. This defense, I think, is a good defense on paper. There is some nice talent. They should be fine against a Florida team that has a ton of question marks on offense. Later in the season, we might be talking about this Utah defense in a different light, but right now I do like where they are, and I think they're going to be good against this Gators offense that's going to struggle.
Looking at the team comparisons, easy notion at quarterback. Cam Rising, certainly better than anyone in that quarterback room for the Gators. Running back room, I think the Gators have it, even though the duo Bernard Jackson's no slouch one bit. Wide receiver, pretty unanimous choice here. Brant Cooley, Muddy Parks, Devon V. Lee certainly have the edge over the Gators. They're probably going to lean on some true freshmen this season. Offensive line, love what the Gators have. It's a top 10 unit for me. That and their backfield is. Every edge on defense goes to Utah, though. I think you can certainly make a case for the Gator secondary being better than Utah's, but I think they have the edge at linebacker, certainly on the defensive line as well. They just have what the Gators don't have, Nick, and I think that's going to be a big key in this game. How do you feel about the tail of the tape?
I think this makes a lot of sense. These comparisons are good. This running back room for Florida is fantastic. Very talented offensive line, physical unit. Quarterback play, Cam Rising, clearly a lot better than Graham Mertz. Wide receiving room, good talent, nice diversity there. The defense, yeah, I think the defensive line's better for Utah, and the linebacking core certainly is. Secondary, though, I'd be willing to give it to Florida. I think there are a lot of guys that are willing to break out this year for Florida and have some nice talent.
Looking at the final thoughts on the prediction, keys to the game for Florida. Their run defense has to stand tall. You don't allow blitzes to rattle your quarterback here, because Mertz, I still feel like this is a very shaky player, even though he does have experience. I think this is going to be a different role for him, and it might certainly allow him to make some mistakes. Interior D-line also for Utah. They need to be strong here against this phenomenal running game and offensive line. Kick this running game out wide, make Florida play from behind as well. I certainly think if they can kick their running game out wide, allow the linebackers to swarm, it's going to be their best opportunity to win. Florida really wants to eat you up on the inside. And if Mertz, again, is playing from behind, mistakes are certain to be made. 38-17, final for me. Nick, you have the same margin of victory as well. I don't think Florida's going to be able to compete for 4 quarters in this one. Going on the road, I think it's just going to be too tough with this quarterback. Too one-dimensional for me. Obviously, last year they were also pretty one-dimensional, but when you have a quarterback who can make plays like AR does with his legs, that whole one-dimension notion really goes out the window.
I agree. Having a complete game changer like that's a really tough thing to replace. Graham Mertz just is not it for me. For me, the key for Florida is to stay ahead of the chains, dominate on the ground, really make that interior defensive line not be too strong and kind of beat them on the interior. I don't think Florida will be able to do it, but that's the key for me. And for Utah, make Florida play from behind, get stops early, force them to throw the ball when they have to, and then also make sure to use a nice balance. Don't push Cam Rising too much. Don't make him do too much. Find him a way to be comfortable in the offense and get his wide receivers involved early. I think Utah dominates this game. I think they'll put up some points through the air. They're going to have a good day, although Florida might keep it close in the first quarter, but after that, they're going to get absolutely blown out and blitzed here. It'll be a tough week for the Gators, certainly.
First marquee matchup of the year. Figures to be an exciting one in one way or another. Appreciate you joining me, Nick. It's going to be a fun season.
Absolutely excited for this Thursday night matchup. A really nice game to highlight the kickoff of the season.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.